They say mirrors remember. Every glance, every whisper, every secret reflected in the cold glass remains. Some believe that a mirror is not just a reflection, but a door. And once, someone got too close. Today's story is about Daniel Moore, a night guard who learned what happens when the reflection looks back. It's a story about silence, guilt, and a voice that never stopped. This is The Voice in the Mirror.
They say every old building remembers its past. Some keep their memories hidden in the walls, others whisper them through broken windows. But sometimes, if you listen closely enough, those memories whisper back through something as simple as a mirror. This is the story of Daniel Moore, a man who never believed in ghosts until the night he started hearing his own reflection speak.
Daniel Moore was a quiet man, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without noticing, though his sharp eyes missed nothing. At 43, his life had settled into a predictable rhythm. Long, silent nights spent guarding empty corridors at the old Riverside Sanatorium, a half-abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. The sanatorium had been closed for decades after a fire destroyed one of its wings, but a private company recently bought the property and was turning it into an archive storage facility. Until renovations were complete, Daniel's job was simple: patrol the halls, check the cameras, and keep squatters away. The place was enormous, built in 1928 with long marble corridors that seemed to breathe when the wind slipped through cracked windows. Every sound echoed: footsteps, keys jingling, the hum of fluorescent lights. At night, it felt less like a building and more like a living thing, exhaling dust and history. Daniel didn't mind. He preferred silence. His small security office was near the west entrance, a room that smelled faintly of rust and disinfectant. On his desk sat an old black and white monitor connected to security cameras that barely worked. In the corner stood a tall, antique mirror, a leftover from when the sanatorium still operated. Its frame was carved from dark oak, ornate and heavy, the kind you'd expect to see in a Victorian mansion. He hadn't paid it much attention at first, just another relic among the peeling paint and broken tiles. Until the night of October 13th.
It started like any other shift. Rain tapping against the windows, the wind whining through the vent shafts. Around 2 a.m., Daniel poured himself a cup of lukewarm coffee and leaned back in his chair, staring at the flickering camera feed. Then he heard it. A faint sound, somewhere behind him. A whisper. He turned around. Nothing. Just the hum of the old vending machine in the hall. He rubbed his eyes and chuckled under his breath. Too much caffeine, Danny boy.
But as he turned back to the monitor, something moved in the reflection of the mirror. A flicker, a shadow, gone before he could focus on it. He froze. The office light buzzed softly overhead. The mirror stood still, reflecting the empty room, the desk, and Daniel himself. Everything seemed normal. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then came the second whisper, clearer this time. A woman's voice. "Don't stay here." Daniel's coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He stared into the mirror. His reflection stared back, wide-eyed, pale, trembling slightly. But what made his breath hitch wasn't his own face. It was the shadow standing behind his reflection, though the space behind him in real life was empty. He spun around. Nothing. He looked back into the mirror. The shadow was gone. Daniel exhaled shakily, ran a hand through his graying hair, and muttered, "Get a grip." He'd worked in creepier places before. Abandoned hospitals had their share of drafts, echoes, and tricks of light. But something about that voice felt too deliberate. Not an echo, not his imagination. It had sounded close, almost inside the room. He picked up the broken pieces of his mug and dumped them into the trash. Then, with a nervous laugh, he turned the mirror toward the wall. Problem solved. The next night, he tried to shake it off. He even brought his portable radio to keep him company, a habit he hadn't had since his early shifts years ago. The old device crackled between stations as he walked the dim corridors, flashlight beams sweeping across faded murals and long-forgotten patient rooms. Every so often, he caught his own reflection in the glass windows, distorted, ghost-like. He didn't like it. When he returned to his office around 1:45 a.m., the first thing he noticed was that the mirror had been turned back around. He stopped in the doorway, pulse hammering in his ears. He was sure, absolutely sure, he had faced it toward the wall before leaving. "Okay," he whispered, scanning the room. "Who's messing with me?" He checked the door, locked from the inside. The windows sealed. No signs of forced entry. He swallowed hard. And then he saw it. Words faintly traced across the mirror's surface, like someone had written them with a finger in the dust. "He's not gone." Daniel stumbled backward, his flashlight clattering to the floor. The words slowly began to fade, not wiped away, but dissolving, as if the glass itself was swallowing them. When they vanished completely, Daniel's reflection blinked, but he hadn't. Daniel didn't sleep that morning. He went home just before dawn, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling slightly as he unlocked the door to his small apartment. He dropped his keys on the counter and stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror while brushing his teeth. Nothing strange there. No shadows, no whispers. Yet when he turned away, a thought lingered, the kind that crawls under the skin and refuses to leave. The voice he'd heard last night, it hadn't sounded threatening. It sounded worried. Don't stay here. Who was she warning him about? That afternoon, Daniel did what every rational man does after something unexplainable. He tried to find an explanation. He drove to the town library, a quiet, musty building with more pigeons than visitors, and looked up old records of the Riverside Sanatorium. The archives were a mess of yellowed papers, faded photos, and brittle folders. But after 2 hours of digging, one headline caught his eye. Doctor found dead in Riverside fire. Investigation inconclusive. October 13th, 1972. The date made him pause. The same night, 53 years earlier, when he had first heard the whisper. The article was brief. A fire had started in the West Wing, killing one person. Dr. Harold Kingsley, psychiatrist known for treating patients with severe psychosis and hallucinations. Witnesses claimed to have seen smoke rising from the upper floors around midnight, but firefighters reported something strange. The blaze had burned out almost instantly, as though it had suffocated itself. No body was ever recovered. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the newspaper trembling slightly in his hands. He whispered, "He's not gone." The words from the mirror echoed in his mind. When Daniel returned to work that evening, the building felt heavier somehow, the air thick, charged with a stillness that pressed against his chest. Even the usual hum of the lights seemed muted. He carried a small digital recorder in his jacket now. If anything strange happened again, he wanted proof. By midnight, nothing had happened. He almost began to feel foolish for being scared. But at 2:03 a.m., the air in the office changed, colder, sharper. His breath misted. And then, faintly, a knock. 3 slow taps. He turned toward the mirror. It stood perfectly still, reflecting the dim light of the room. "Who's there?" he said quietly. No answer. He took a step closer, his reflection mirroring every motion except for one detail. Daniel froze. His reflection's eyes were slightly off, not following him exactly. They were staring past him toward the door. He turned and saw it. For the briefest second, the outline of a man, tall, wearing a long coat, standing just outside the office, motionless. Then, like smoke caught in wind, it vanished. The recorder in Daniel's pocket clicked softly as it ran. He backed away from the mirror, heart pounding, whispering, "This can't be real. This can't be real." But then the mirror fogged over, as though someone on the other side had breathed against the glass, and slowly letters began to form. "He wants his face back." Daniel stumbled out into the corridor, flashlight trembling in his grip. The hall stretched endlessly before him, a gray tunnel of cracked paint and shadows. He wanted to call his supervisor, to quit right there and then, but his radio only emitted static. As he passed one of the old patient rooms, a light flickered inside. Room 207. The plaque on the door was half broken, but he could still read the name etched on the metal. Dr. H. Kingsley. The doorknob was cold as ice. He hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside, the room looked untouched for decades, dusty, with overturned furniture and papers scattered across the floor. In the corner stood another mirror, smaller than the one in his office, but identical in design. And on the cracked wall above it, written in faded ink, "We see what we deserve." Daniel's flashlight flickered. The mirror's surface shimmered faintly, as if water moved behind the glass. And then, from somewhere deep inside the reflection, came a faint whisper. "Help me." This time, it was a man's voice. Daniel stepped closer. "Who are you?" Your answer, only a low, rhythmic sound, like breathing from the other side. Then, suddenly, the reflection shifted. For an instant, Daniel didn't see himself anymore. He saw a man in a white coat, his face pale and burned, eyes wide with terror. Daniel gasped and stumbled backward, the mirror cracking as his flashlight hit the floor. The sound echoed through the empty halls. When he looked again, the reflection was gone, replaced by his own trembling image. But now, behind him, the shadow had returned, closer. He ran back to his office, slammed the door, and pressed his back against it. The air felt heavy, electric. He grabbed the recorder and pressed play with shaking fingers. At first, silence. Then, the faint sound of his footsteps. And after that, a whisper. A man's voice, calm, cold. "Daniel, stop looking for me." He dropped the recorder. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the darkness, the mirror began to glow faintly, a dull, silvery light pulsing from its center. And from deep inside it came a voice, soft, familiar. "He's not gone. He's waiting." Morning came, pale and colorless. Daniel sat in his car outside the sanatorium, gripping the steering wheel long after his shift had ended. His reflection in the windshield looked almost like a stranger, eyes sunken, face drained of sleep. He hadn't told anyone what happened. Who would believe him? A voice in a mirror, a dead doctor, a whisper calling his name. It all sounded like the ravings of a man who'd lost his mind. But the recorder, that was real.
He played the tape again and again that morning, headphones pressed tight to his ears. Each time he heard the same words, a man's voice, calm and deliberate. "Daniel, stop looking for me." He hadn't imagined it. Something or someone inside that building was aware of him. By evening, the sky had turned the color of steel. A low fog clung to the hills as Daniel drove back to the sanatorium, headlights cutting through the mist. He decided he couldn't leave things unfinished. He needed to know the truth. Before starting his shift, he visited the maintenance office, where old blueprints of the building were kept. The maps were yellowed and brittle, but one detail stood out: a basement level below the west wing, sealed off after the 1972 fire. Room B13 was marked with a faded red X. Next to it, scribbled in pencil, "Mirror Lab." Daniel frowned. "Mirror Lab?" he murmured aloud. He took the blueprint and tucked it into his jacket. If there was something down there connected to the voice, that's where he'd find it. By midnight, the sanatorium felt even emptier than usual. Not even the usual hum of the ventilation echoed through the halls. As he made his way to the west stairwell, Daniel's flashlight beam danced over peeling paint and rusted signs. Authorized personnel only. Fire damage, restricted area. The door to the basement was chained shut, but the old metal had weakened with age. After a few strikes from his crowbar, the lock snapped. The air that greeted him was heavy, stale, damp, and tinged with something metallic. He descended slowly, each step creaking under his boots. The corridor below was narrow and lined with medical equipment long forgotten. Cracked jars, broken cabinets, and papers turned to pulp by time. But at the far end, through a half-open door, something glimmered faintly. The mirror. Unlike the others, this one was enormous, nearly floor to ceiling, its frame engraved with strange symbols. The surface wasn't just reflective, it seemed alive, pulsing with faint ripples like disturbed water. And there, standing before it, was a shape. Your reflection, a figure, a man in a white coat. Daniel froze, the beam of his flashlight trembling. Dr. Kingsley? The figure didn't move. It stood still, its face obscured in darkness. But when Daniel took a step closer, the man in the glass turned his head slowly and smiled. The reflection raised its hand. Daniel's arm stayed at his side. "Who are you?" Daniel whispered. The reflection's lips moved soundlessly at first. Then the voice came, not from the air, but from inside Daniel's mind. "You opened the door." Daniel stumbled back, heart hammering. "What door?" "The one between us."
The lights flickered, the walls groaned, the mirror's surface began to swirl like liquid mercury. Through the distortion, Daniel saw flashes, images that weren't his own. A man in a lab coat working late at night, surrounding by rows of mirrors, patients screaming as their reflections twisted, flames consuming the room. And then a face, his own. He gasped, "What the hell?" The voice in his head grew louder, overlapping with his own thoughts. He wanted to cure madness by separating it. He found a way to split the mind. One part stays, one part reflects. But when the fire came, they merged again. Daniel clutched his temples. The words weren't his, but they flooded his mind like a flood breaking through a dam. "Stop it!" he shouted. The reflection smiled wider. "You came back, Harold." Daniel froze. "What did you call me?" "You think you're the guard. You've always thought that. But you were the doctor. You never left." "No," Daniel whispered. "That's not true." The mirror's surface pulsed violently, the reflection now moving out of sync, slower, distorted. The white coat on the man inside began to burn, black smoke filling the glass. "You burned the patients. You trapped me here." Daniel stumbled backward as the mirror cracked, spider webs of light splitting across its surface. The air filled with whispers, men, women, children, all calling from inside the glass. "He's not gone. He's not gone. He's still here." The mirror shattered. A blinding flash swallowed the room. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was standing in his office. Everything was quiet, just as it had been before. The mirror stood in the corner, perfectly intact. No cracks, no dust. He blinked. On the desk lay his ID card, but the name on it read Dr. Harold Kingsley. He backed away in horror. "No, no, that's not mine." But when he looked into the mirror again, the reflection staring back at him wasn't Daniel anymore. It was the burned man in the white coat. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Two men separated by glass and time. Then the reflection smiled faintly and whispered, "Now you remember." Daniel, or Harold, stepped forward, pressing his hand against the glass. The reflection did the same, perfectly aligned. A spark of light flickered where their palms met, and then, slowly, the reflection spoke one last time. "You can't run from your reflection." The lights flickered out. When they came back on, the mirror was empty. The room was silent. Only the faint sound of breathing came from the other side. The following morning, Daniel woke to the sound of rain hammering against his window. The gray light filtering through the blinds looked unreal, too pale, too quiet. He sat up slowly, his body aching as if he hadn't slept at all. His apartment looked the same, but something felt wrong. The air carried that same cold, metallic tang from the sanatorium basement. He walked to the bathroom and stared into the mirror above the sink. For a long moment, everything seemed normal. His tired face, his stubble, the faint scar on his jawline. But then, just for an instant, his reflection blinked out of sync. He froze. The reflection smiled a fraction of a second too late. "Not again," Daniel whispered. "No, this isn't real." He splashed water on his face, breathing hard. But when he looked up again, the reflection had changed. The man in the mirror wasn't him anymore. It was Dr. Kingsley, burned skin, hollow eyes, and yet the voice that spoke sounded like his own. "You left me there." Daniel staggered backward, knocking over a chair. "I didn't. I'm not you." "You are what's left of me," the reflection said quietly. "When the fire came, you ran. You hid in the dark corners of your mind and built yourself a new name. But you can't hide forever." The lights in the bathroom flickered, and for a moment, the reflection's burned face smoothed into Daniel's own, then back again. Two faces, one soul. By evening, Daniel was back at the sanatorium, though he didn't remember the drive. The rain followed him, drumming on the cracked roof like fingers tapping glass. Inside, the building felt alive. The walls seemed to pulse, the air thick with whispers that rose and fell like breath. Every mirror he passed, in broken frames, on elevator doors, even in puddles on the floor, reflected not just him, but versions of him, younger, older, twisted, and burned. Each one whispered in unison, "He's not gone." Daniel pressed his hands over his ears and shouted, "Stop!" But the voices didn't stop. They grew louder, overlapping, filling the hallway with an impossible chorus. He ran. Through corridors that twisted into shapes he didn't recognize. Through doors that led to rooms long since destroyed. The sanatorium's layout no longer followed reason. It bent, reshaped itself, as if guiding him toward something. At last, he reached the basement door again. The lock was gone. He descended into darkness. The room at the end of the hall, the one that had held the giant mirror, looked different now. The mirror had reformed itself, seamless and gleaming. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting not the room, but another world. The sanatorium as it once was, bright and new, alive with people. Daniel stared. On the other side, doctors walked the halls, patients laughed in the courtyard, and in the middle of it all, Dr. Kingsley stood at a desk, writing notes in a journal. Daniel whispered, This was before the fire." The reflection looked up, straight at him. Then, without warning, the glass rippled, and Kingsley stepped through. The air crackled like static as he emerged, burned, ghostly, but solid. His eyes glowed faintly with that cold mirror light. "You kept me here," Kingsley said softly. "You locked me behind the glass and lived my life." Daniel backed away. "No, I was just doing my job. I don't remember you." Then Kingsley tilted his head. "Of course you don't. You erased me. The mind is clever that way. When you couldn't live with what you did, you became someone else. What I did?" Kingsley stepped closer. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. "You wanted to cure madness," he said, voice trembling between anger and grief. "You thought if you could separate the good from the evil inside the mind, you could heal it. But when you used the mirror on yourself—" His burned hand lifted, pointing toward Daniel's chest. "You created me." Daniel felt something break inside him. A pressure behind his eyes, a rush of memories bursting through. The experiments, the screams, the smell of smoke. And his own voice shouting through the flames, "It's not real, it's only the reflection." He fell to his knees. "No, please." Kingsley knelt in front of him, face flickering between pity and fury. "You can't kill a reflection, Daniel. You can only join it." The mirror behind them began to glow again, light spilling out like liquid silver. Shadows rose from its surface, hundreds of them, faces trapped in glass, reaching outward with silent mouths. Daniel's reflection appeared among them, perfectly calm. "It's time."
"No!" Daniel screamed, backing away. But his feet slipped and his hand brushed the mirror's surface. It was warm, alive. The silver light surged, pulling him forward. He tried to resist, but Kingsley's burned hands grasped his shoulders and shoved. "Take my place." The world inverted. When the light faded, Daniel found himself standing in a silent room, his hands pressed against smooth glass. On the other side stood Kingsley, whole again, his face unscarred, his white coat pristine. "Wait!" Daniel said, his voice echoing strangely. "Let me out!"
But Kingsley only smiled faintly. Someone has to keep the door closed. He turned away, walking toward the exit, as the sanatorium around him flickered and reformed into something new, clean, modern, filled with life again. And Daniel, now the one behind the mirror, screamed soundlessly, watching as the glass sealed itself shut. Weeks later, the Riverside Archive facility officially opened. Workers moved through the halls, carrying boxes, laughing, chatting. The building gleamed with fresh paint and new lighting. In the West office, an antique mirror hung on the wall, polished, decorative, harmless. But sometimes, when the night guards passed by, they swore they saw a face in it. A man's face, pale and desperate, mouthing words they couldn't hear. And if you stood there long enough, sometimes you could see the faintest fog on the glass, as if someone on the other side were breathing. The Riverside Archive facility had been opened for 6 weeks. To most of the staff, the place was just another renovated building, all bright hallways, humming computers, and the faint scent of disinfectant. The ghosts of the old sanatorium were forgotten, buried under layers of paint and paperwork. All except one man. Evan Cross, the new night guard, had heard the rumors from day one. They said the West office was haunted, that sometimes if you worked the night shift alone, you'd hear whispers, like someone talking softly behind you. He didn't believe it, of course, not really, but still, on his second week, he asked the manager if he could switch offices. Why? The manager had asked. That one's got the best heater. Evan had shrugged. It's the mirror, sir. It gives me the creeps. The manager laughed. Oh, that thing? Historical artifact from the old building. They say it survived the fire. Don't worry. It's just glass. Evan had smiled politely, but that night, as he sat in the same chair Daniel Moore once occupied, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The mirror gleamed faintly in the corner, reflecting the soft light of the monitors. Around 2 a.m., the building grew silent, that deep, eerie silence only large, empty places have at night. Evan poured himself a cup of coffee and stared into the mirror. His reflection stared back, tired and bored. Then the lights flickered. Only for a second, but long enough for him to notice something wrong. When the lights came back, his reflection hadn't moved. He blinked. Weird. He waved a hand. The reflection followed, half a second too late. A chill prickled down his spine. He got up, walked closer. His face looked the same. Brown hair, faint stubble, but his eyes seemed off. Like there was someone else looking out through them. And then, faintly, on the surface of the glass, a mist formed, as if someone were breathing from the other side. "Help me." The words appeared slowly, written in fog, then vanished. Evan staggered back, heart pounding. Nope, I'm not doing this. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, fumbling for his radio. But before he could speak into it, a voice came from behind him. Soft, familiar. "Don't stay here." He froze. The mirror now reflected 2 figures, his own and another standing behind him. A man with pale skin, tired eyes, and the faint shimmer of firelight behind him. Evan turned around. No one there. When he looked back, the figure had stepped closer in the reflection. "Tell them I'm still here," the man whispered. "Tell them he's not gone." Evan ran. The next morning, the manager found the office empty, the radio buzzing quietly on the desk. Evan had left his security badge behind, along with a note scrawled on a torn piece of paper. "There's someone in the mirror. Don't go near it." They laughed it off, of course. People always do. The mirror stayed. It was too expensive to remove, too heavy to move. A piece of history, they called it. But in the months that followed, strange things started to happen. Lights flickered for no reason. Security footage showed flickering shapes where no one stood. And one night, a cleaner swore she saw a face looking back at her that wasn't her own. The rumors spread again, the same as before, but the truth was simpler and far darker. Because behind that mirror, in the thin, silver place between worlds, Daniel Moore was still there. He no longer screamed, no longer begged. The glass had grown quiet around him, and he had learned to listen. Sometimes, faintly, he could hear the world beyond. Footsteps, laughter, the echo of a life that no longer belonged to him. He would whisper sometimes, just to remind himself he was still real. "My name is Daniel Moore." But every time he said it, the reflection in front of him, the other man, the one who'd taken his face, would whisper back, "No, you're Harold Kingsley." And then they would stare at each other until the light faded. Years passed. The Riverside facility changed owners again, then closed down, just as it had before. Time wore down the walls, dust covered the floors, and the mirror, that cursed, perfect mirror, stood alone in the dark once more. No guards, no workers, only silence. Until one night, lightning split the sky, and for a brief moment, the power returned. The old fluorescent light flickered to life. And in that moment, if anyone had been there to see, they would have noticed something strange. The mirror didn't show the room. It showed a man walking toward it, carrying a flashlight. A man who hadn't aged a day in 50 years. He reached out and touched the glass. The surface rippled softly. And from deep within, two voices whispered in unison. "He's not gone. He never was." Some say the Riverside Sanatorium was finally demolished a few years later. Others claim the mirror was moved to a museum or maybe to another hospital. No one knows for sure. But if you ever find yourself alone at night and you glance into a mirror that feels colder than it should be, look closely, because sometimes the reflection staring back isn't you at all.